Some racials in WoW are super underrated, like for example the Goblin Rocket Jump. Yeah, Goblin is maybe not the highest in DPS sims on some classes and class specs, right? But hey, some skills have their uses, or the Worgen Speed one for example. But yeah, today we're going to have a look at the top 10 mobility based racial abilities.
In WoW, every playable race or allied race has at least 3 unique abilities specific to their own race. We won't be looking at racial abilities that help the player escape roots or stun effects or other DPS abilities, since they could appear in another video entirely on its own. So in this list, we'll just go over abilities that help you move faster in some way. And at number 10, we have the Worgen racial ability named Running Wild. This ability was added in Cataclysm and allows a Worgen to drop on all fours and run faster. By doing this, the Worgen player can gain an increased movement speed up to 100%. Players learn Running Wild at level 10 when riding becomes available. While Running Wild may appear to be more akin to a druid's travel form, it actually functions as a mount, which is more of a curse than a blessing. Since it is not a travel form, being able to ride a Worgen while it's in its Running Wild stance is unfortunately not possible, but it would be very cool if it was. Running Wild is so low on this list because it has several drawbacks. First, Running Wild is not an instant cast and requires a 1.5 second cast time. This is probably because 1.5 seconds is the universal required time to mount up, but it still sucks it cannot be used instantly. Like any other mount, Running Wild has an indefinite duration until it's cancelled by the...
You know what's funny? And this is on my druid like that. If I'm with like other people and I'm on my druid and I use like my flying form and stuff, it's like instantly. I'm always faster somewhere than others. Like even in dungeons, I can immediately change the shape and be like super fast. So my druid, I'm usually the first at certain places I have to go with my group. But yeah, this Running Wild, I think this is maybe one of the least useful racials that a race has. Like the fantasy behind this was probably, you are a werewolf, right? And werewolves, they are fast themselves and it's like lore friendly. So you know what? Let's add them something so people can like immerse themselves in being a werewolf and stuff. And that's why it was added for the maybe more RP community or something.
The player or until they're dismounted.
It doesn't help you at all in
technically a mount. Running Wild can neither be used in dungeons, raids, or indoor zones where mounts are not allowed.
But they have another
nor can be
speed
used
ratio.
in combat. Unfortunately, Running Wild is mostly useless at max level, since most mounts will give a faster mount speed than Running Wild would. Running Wild will always have an increased mount speed of 100%, unaffected by things like most mount speed auras, mount equipments, and Pathfinder achievement speed boosts. All the while, the expert riding skill gives a flying mount speed 310%.
But wait 1 second, guys. Will you also actually look at this? Worgen has like one other racial skill that is not a travel form. It's not a mount form or anything, but you can use this. It has like, was it like 1.5 minutes or so? I'm not even sure how long the cooldown was, but there's like this one skill that makes you walk faster for a short period of time. And from what I've seen, this was like really good in PvP, because if you're on a Fury Warrior, for example, you want to put like pressure on your target and people are trying to run behind their friends or behind some objects so you can't DPS them, especially if they're like a bit lower, right? Like this was actually really useful. I saw someone like have a fight against someone in Battlegrounds and this person was constantly up on that person's face and this person couldn't do anything defensively because on that Worgen, this person just clicked not only on the gap closer, but if the gap closer was not an option, would use this speed skill. It's actually, like, the other one is not so bad, but this one sucks.
This means that using Running Wild with maximum riding skill means it will always be more than a third slower than any flying mount. Running Wild did have one noticeable usefulness at max level, which is that it could be used in the maw before ground mounts were allowed, which gave Worgen players a significant advantage over other players while in the zone. And at number 9, we have a racial ability of the Night Elf called Wisp Spirit. This is a Night Elf ability that allows players to turn into a wisp upon death and increase their movement speed by 75%. This racial has been around since vanilla, where in vanilla it was a 50% speed increase, but this was changed to 75% in
That's actually OP in WoW
Some
Classic.
players in the WoW community disparagingly refer to the racial ability as improved death, mocking Night Elves for having a racial ability that is only useful after dying.
Yeah, some people hate it, but I tell you something. If you were like leveling in WoW Classic a Night Elf, and usually like WoW Classic you die every once in a while, right? Like while questing, you pull either too many mobs and you get killed, or there's like an elite you're supposed to kill with like 1 or 2 others, and you're just by yourself, you don't find anyone, and you're like, you know what, let me try anyway. There's nobody online right now, it's like super late. And then you like wipe 2-3 times until you beat this, but hey, at least for those comebacks, like you're a bit faster. But yeah, this doesn't really affect gameplay at all. It's also definitely one of the weaker ones. Yeah.
Rather than something that is useful to prevent them from dying in the first place. The ability is situationally useful, however, and unlike many other racial abilities, benefits all classes. If a player wishes to see what a Wisp form looks
universal.
like, they can gain the toy Wisp amulet from recovering Night Elf archaeology fragments. This toy allows the player to take on the appearance of a Wisp for 20 seconds and has a 10-minute cooldown. Unfortunately, it does not provide the speed buff, and any damage taken will cancel the effect.
Oh.
The lore on the archaeology panel in-game states, Wisps are nature spirits thought to be dead Night Elves. They exist in tight connection with the forest homeland and Night Elves in general, performing such beneficial activities as construction, repair, and defense of elven communities.
And this is what blows my mind here, and I'm not sure if they messed up like Blizzard lore-wise with Shadowlands. If wisps are nature spirits thought to be dead night elves, then what about like the Shadowlands and, for example, like Night Fae and all that, where like so many night elven spirits go and stuff, right? Like their souls. So this was something that actually blew my mind, because this was like something I loved in freaking Warcraft 3 even and stuff, right? Like, it's like so mysterious, like what happens in the afterlife. Do actually really night elves, if they die, turn into wisps? Is there some sort of heaven in World of Warcraft and some hell or something? And then we got the Shadowlands, and it just broke the imagination and fantasy we had about the afterlife in WoW, unfortunately, yeah.
Many Wisps sacrifice themselves in order to defeat Archimonde at the end of the Third War, and again sacrificing themselves to defend Darkshore from the Horde, and again when the burning of Teldrassil killed countless Night Elves, who would have become Wisps, if not for Elune trying to send them to Ardenwald to assist, ending with them in the Maw, to only be recovered and joined within the new seat of Elune, so there are fewer Wisps today than there once were for countless reasons. This ability is listed at number 9 because it is only useful while dead, and a lot of the gameplay in WoW focuses on not dying. However, Wisp Spirit certainly makes corpse runs much faster and easier, and can be great for classes that have no resurrection or healing abilities, like warriors. That being said, the uses of Wisp form are still fairly niche, and only applicable to the player for a small amount of time. This is thus more of a gimmicky racial ability, but nevertheless it is still one that can be extremely handy. And at number 8, we have the Mag'har Orc racial ability named Open Skies, which increases a Mag'har Orc's mounted speed by 10%.
I tell you guys something, and this is a fact. If you're playing a Mag'har Orc and you have a crafter, one that gathers resources, like Mag'har is so OP. If you have this, like this buff right here, you can go from node to node in no time. Or if you're like doing alchemy and you're like collecting herbs, like this one is so great. Like trust me, with this, you can farm so much faster stuff and make lots of gold.
This is a passive ability that was added in BFA with the introduction of the Mag'har Orc allied race.
Doesn't affect
Open
combat, but
Skies
it's
is
really
very
great for
useful
gathering.
when doing open world content such as World Quest or flying to rares. Unfortunately, this ability does not stack with other speed buffs, with 2 exceptions. The only exceptions we could find are the guild perk Mount Up and the Death Knight ability on a Pale Horse. This means with the maximum flying speed increase of 310%, Mag'har Arcs can go at least 320% speed. Additionally, Open Skies also works in battlegrounds and arenas, whereas other mounted speed buffs do not work. 10% extra speed may not seem like a lot, but it does add up quite quickly over distance and time. Imagine how much extra time even a little speed boost would save a player when they're traveling around Azeroth or other worlds to collect candy buckets during Hollow's End, or lighting fires during the Midsummer Fire Festival. Or, of course, crossing continents for world quests and dailies 10% faster. Open Skies has few active uses, but it does have a slight impact on gameplay and makes flying to other places a little bit easier, so it lands at number 8 on this list.
Wait, that's
and at number 7, we have
too,
the Void Elf racial ability named Spatial Rift. This ability functions somewhat similarly to the Venthyr's Door of Shadows, a Mage's Blink ability, a Bleat and much slower form.
Like, if you are like really experienced with WoW and you have been playing for eternity and you know like certain, let's say, mechanics even in dungeons and stuff, if you can predict what will happen next and you can actually prepare some sort of teleportation, then you're actually even faster DPS wise. And I tell you guys why, because there are like a lot of skills that have like a cast time, so you can't cast that while you're moving, right? So if you have this kind of teleportation, and you prepare this on a certain, let's say, DPS phase in M plus or something, I actually see this one as like super useful. Or it can be used as a survival skill to like not die in PvP. But even in PvE, if you know already like a certain dungeon, you know when this and that mechanic will happen, you can prepare ahead this, and you know, okay, now I will have a shorter duration that I do not DPS. Like you will have, let's say, a mage, for example, and you have like, let's say you were for some reason with 2 mages or something, right? Or like a mage warlock. What you can do then is, like, if this person's another race and maybe the race has more DPS value on sims, if you use this actually effectively, you maybe are able to deal 2 seconds earlier DPS than another race, what overall leads actually in the path of the whole dungeon to the Void Elf actually doing more damage than other races if you are smart with this. This is the same with like freaking Goblin, like Rocket Jump, what I said at the beginning. I think Goblin Rocket Jump is such a useful skill that you would rather sacrifice 1 person DPS to have such a mobility skill than just go for something that's pure numbers but doesn't help you in, let's say, an emergency situation or to reposition. And those kind of skills, I really love them in PvP when I'm under pressure because it can help me survive. So I think this is very OP. And yeah, by the way, guys, if you are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content.
Or more like the Warlock's Demonic Circle, but placed in a very different
you can use it on
form,
Mage, for
and
example.
only lasting 5
Get
seconds
back to
instead of
DPS
15
immediately.
minutes. The player first activates Spatial Rift to send out a bolt of void energy up to 30 yards in front of them.
And then you
Activating Spatial Rift again will teleport the player to where the void portal currently is, but the player must...
This is exactly what I mean. So imagine there's like some huge ground AoE that appears and you know it's about to be cast, or someone messes up and doesn't interrupt or whatever. Like you can immediately use this and prepare ahead, right? Like you see, oh, in 2 seconds something's gonna happen. Like this is why it's so good.
do so within 5 seconds of the initial cast.
And Mage looks cool
Spatial
too.
Rift was added to WoW and Legion, specifically in patch 7.3.5, alongside the launch of the Void Elf Allied race with the BFA pre-purchase. Spatial Rift has a handful of problems, with the most obvious being that a player can usually just walk faster than it, which certainly sucks a lot of the usefulness out of the ability. However, not all is lost, as it can sometimes be very handy in PvP situations, like quickly carrying a flag across Warsong Gulch while slow. It can also be used in Mythic Plus to skip some trash packs, as long as your allies also have a way to skip by them. Aside from those 2 reasons, its uses are few since it has so many drawbacks. Pair that with the fact that it has a 3-minute cooldown, this ability is very limited in its use. If you cast it and don't activate it within 5 seconds, if you step too far away from it, if it hits a wall or a random tiny object on the ground, or if you cast it with your back to the wall, it is wasted, and you gotta wait another 3 minutes to try it again. And at number 6, we have the Night Elf ability, Elusiveness. Elusiveness is a passive Night Elf racial ability that slightly increases a rogue or druid's movement speed by 5% while using stealth or prowl. And no, for obvious reasons, this does not work with Shadow Meld, as you can't move while Shadow Melding. So it only affects rogues, stealth/vanish, and druids PAL. Elusiveness was added in Wrath, and its original iteration reduced the chance that enemies could detect Night Elves while they were Shadow Meld or Stealth. But
this is good anyway, because if you're in Stealth, you're anyway not really super fast, right? And you can't use freaking speed stuff, and like... I actually think if you have this, and you can get in Stealth 5% faster to your target, this is quite useful. Like, I actually love this ratio. I think it's actually very underrated, especially in PvP. If you're in PvP getting into Stealth and you want to attack a target and you can get like 5% faster to it, I think that's a big deal.
Elusiveness was chained so that it reduced the chance of being detected by enemies, only applied to Shadow Meld, and enemy reduction notice was removed from affecting stealth entirely. To compensate, Elusiveness was changed so that it also increased movement speed by 5%, while a Night Elf Rogue or Druid was in stealth. In Legion, Elusiveness was changed so the reduction in enemies being able to notice the player no longer worked with Shadow Meld. Because Elusiveness is so niche and requires the player to be both a Night Elf and a Rogue or Druid, this speed boost only affects a very small number of players, and isn't very high on this list for that reason. However, it is especially great in PvP, where rogues and druids spend a lot of time in stealth. This 5% speed boost can change the game. Or if you're a rogue doing pickpocketing runs, this is also very useful. And at number 5, we have a racial ability for the Dark Iron Dwarves called Dungeon Delver. This is a passive racial ability that allows all Dark Iron Dwarves to move 4% faster while indoors. Since it applies to anywhere indoors, Dungeon Delver can also be used to move slightly faster through many places in both Azeroth and beyond. Dungeon Delver also stacks with other speed abilities like Speed Potions, which is indeed very handy. For example, a Dark Iron
You know what's funny about this? Like, people were actually making fun of this ratio when the Dark Iron Doors were introduced. Like, somewhere in like the comments and stuff and on forums. Like, what do we need 4-person faster walking indoors and stuff? And even today, like, I really don't get this. Like, what does this bring you gameplay-wise? Like, there isn't too much indoors content, is there? And if you're in like a dungeon, what's the point if you are faster? You have to wait for your group anyway, right? It's pretty high on the list, and I want to know, like, why it's so high. I would have put this actually on maybe 8. Yeah, I would have maybe moved this to 8 or something. I wonder, why is this on number 5? Let's see what he has to say.
Dungeon Delver also stacks with other speed abilities like speed potions, which is indeed very handy. For example, a Dark Iron Dwarf Shaman in Ghost Wolf form can move at 34%
nice.
speed rather than just 30% with the baseline Ghost Wolf ability. The Dungeon Delver ability was added in BFA in patch 8.0, when the Dark Iron allied race became available for Alliance players and their counterparts,
cool
the
race,
Nightcar
don't get
Orc,
me
became
wrong.
available to Horde players. Dungeon Delver has so far remained the same since then, with no plans to change it, although 4% does seem rather an odd choice compared to a nice 5%. The
Yeah,
lore behind this
that's-
ability is pretty simple. Dark Iron Dwarves founded and live in the city of Shadowforge, which is in the dungeon Blackrock Depths. Given
Yeah.
the long time Dark Iron Dwarves have lived far underground, it makes sense that they would have adapted to be able to easily maneuver in dark and twisted passages.
True.
While not the most impressive of movement speed abilities, Dungeon Delver still is a movement speed buff, and can be very helpful in any dungeon or raid, as most
And another thing is, if you look at like the eyes of the Dark Iron Dwarves, they are freaking glowing. I'm pretty sure that they emit some light and stuff, so if they're like in dark caves, they can actually see with the help of their burning beard, hair, and eyes, right? Because there's like a bit of light. It's like, it's actually cool.
are considered indoors. Dungeon Delver's impact is usually small, but it can still make a difference in some situations, such as Mythic Plus, although rarely for PvP.
Yeah, but you have
as
to wait
most
for your
PvP
group
scenarios
anyway.
are considered outside, so it definitely deserves a spot on this list. And at number 4, we have the Zandalari racial Embrace the Loa. There are 6 Loas that Zandalari can pray to and receive their blessings, each given a different buff, each based on the specific Loa, but for this
You're
entry
usually
we're
going for
focusing
Paku
on
most of
Embrace
the time,
Gonk,
right?
which increases your movement speed by 5%. The Shrine of Gonk is located in the middle of Dazara
Who
lore
picks
besides
this?
the Paku Shrine. After the player has given an offer to Gonk, they gain the passive ability Embrace of Gonk. The Embrace of Gonk does stack with other speed movement buffs, like the previously mentioned Ghost Wolf form and some of the Druid shapeshifting forms. There are several downsides to this ability. First, Embrace of Gonk does not apply to mounted speed. Second, Zandalari players
It
can
does
only
not?
change their Loa and thus their Loa's Embrace only once every 5 days, which is one of the longest player ability cooldowns in the entire game. This means Embrace of Gonk comes at the price of not being able to have one of the other
Yeah, there's no way I would sacrifice Paku for this, because I'm stuck 5 days with it. And what else do you get from Gong? Is it just the movement speed, or what else was it? Like, I was advised to not pick it on my Zandalari. And yeah, maybe I see why. And this doesn't stack up with Mount. That means like the Mecha one is like way more useful. If you're like hardcore farming stuff, and you want to like pick up a lot of things, or you're doing like dailies, yeah, Mecha for this. Yeah, this can't keep up with it. But one second, is this also with stealth, I wonder? Is it like not kind of like the Night Elven one, if you're in stealth, that you're also 5% faster? So if you're like a druid or rogue? Like, this would need to be tested, or does he mention it actually?
5 passive
See.
abilities which the other Loas can grant the Zandalari players. By choosing the Embrace of Gonk and its 5% movement speed, players forsake Akunda's chance to heal extra while using healing spells, Blomsamdi's occasional DPS and healing buff,
Yeah.
Kimball's chance to cause a bleed effect, Kragwa's chance to grant health and armor,
So
and
much
Paku's
better.
chance to grant critical strike.
This is the
Embrace of Gonk
strongest.
is one of the best movement speed racials in the entire game and can be quite handy for running old raids, especially when combined with another Zandalari racial, City of Gold, which increases all gold found by 2%. This racial is pretty much right out better than Dark Iron Dwarves, simply by the fact
True.
that it's 1% faster,
Yeah.
and you can pick and choose whichever one you want. And at number 3 on this list, we have Rocket Jump, which is a Goblin racial ability. Originally introduced in Cataclysm, this ability allows the player to jump forward several yards, a reverse
one of
version
the
of the
best
Hunter's
ratios
Disengage
in-game.
ability. In Cataclysm, the ability had a 2-minute cooldown, but this was changed to 90 seconds in patch 6.2. Rocket Jump works
This is
very similar
necessary.
to a Demon Hunter's Double Jump, as it grants the player the ability to jump twice as high as a forward direction. Rocket Jump can also be thought of as somewhat similar to a mage's Blink ability. The ability
Yeah,
to teleport or
basically.
jump forward can
Or the
situationally be
Night
useful,
Phase skill,
but
right?
certainly not all the time. According to the
that no
tooltip for the
longer
ability,
exists.
the rockets activate from the Goblin's belt, giving rise to some players calling this ability butt rockets. Rocket jump can also be used to mitigate fall damage. If the player
I've done this quite often. Like sometimes I had to go somewhere, there's like some sort of bridge or there's like an elevator like Thunder Bluff. I don't bother in Thunder Bluff when I'm on my goblin actually with the freaking elevator. I will just freaking jump down, and when I'm like close to the ground I just freaking press this. This is the same like what I do with, what's like disengage or what this skill is called, or like Hunter, right? I do the same thing, and here too. But this is so good if you're dodging mechanics. So if you're doing like a dungeon, right? And there's again like a mechanic. I said this again like with this Void Elf skill, right? It's the same. Like you can prepare ahead. So if you know already a dungeon, it's like, let's say your second time in it or third time, like you know this phase is going to happen, so you save your rocket jump for this. You're not going to set it on cooldown, and you want to do like maximum DPS, so you want to spend less time walking around, but you want to DPS more. You know, okay, in 1 second something's gonna happen, I just freaking press this skill now. And then you jump out of this dangerous situation dungeon and you immediately back on DPS, while other races need to walk for like 2-3 seconds to reposition. But you can reposition with this almost instantly. And I like this a lot, same with Void Elf. I love this kind of reposition ratios because they give you in certain scenarios an advantage, and in PvP they can be a lifesaver if people focus you on your, let's say in a group, and they say, oh, you know what, let's take this guy down first. So you can actually escape and have your friends do DPS or save your behind, right? Or your healer or something. So I think this is very good, PvE and in PvP.
used to mitigate fall damage, if the player uses it in the air right before they land, exactly like a Hunter's Disengage, Warrior's Heroic Leap, Rogue's Grappling Hook, or even a well-timed Mage Blink. Other than sharing a cooldown with another Goblin racial ability named Rocket Barrage, which is a DPS ability, there really is no downside to Rocket Jump, and it's one of the best mobility abilities in the game, let alone just racial abilities. It can be used in nearly all gameplay aspects of WoW, and is sometimes incorporated into a Goblin's player's rotation abilities, since it can also be somewhat useful. It was especially useful for the mythic version of the Kil'jaeden fight in Tomb of Sargeras, as it was seen as required because of the obscene amount of knockback abilities that were in the fight. And this rocket jump made the fight much easier, and because of this, it was a bit of an outrage, as all of the world first guilds were basically forced to race change and even faction change to as many goblins as possible. For all these reasons and more, rocket jump quite literally lands at number 3 on this list. And at number 2, we have the High Mountain Tauren racial ability, Bull Rush. This ability allows the player to rush forward at 200% speed for 1 second and stuns any enemies in their path for 1.5 seconds. Bull Rush is somewhat functionally similar to a Monk's Flying Serpent Kick. 200%.
But one thing I wish they changed about it, like, this is good, you have an extra stun, but one thing I hate, if you use this, you can't move while using it. So if you're like trying to stun a target that moves while you're using it to the side, you can't freaking chase it, so you're going like a straight line, right? So people or like mobs can sometimes actually get out of the reach of this, and you can't like turn around and change your direction and go in a curve. Like you're going a straight line, you're not going in a curve. So if someone walks to the, even PvP, to the left or right, like what can you do? You can do nothing, and then it's like wasted, unfortunately. And then 2-minute cooldown. Like I wish they made it where you can actually move while being in that rush, so if someone tries to sidestep it, you can actually still get them, or the mob or something.
Bull Rush is somewhat functionally similar to a Monk's Flying Serpent Kick. 200% speed may not sound like much, but that is an incredible ground speed buff, and can easily send the player 20 to 30 yards forwards. This speed is roughly 2/3 the maximum flying speed, which is 310%. This makes Bull Rush a great racial mobility ability, which also has a pretty low cooldown of only 2 minutes. Bull Rush has remained unchanged since it was added in the Legion patch 7.3.5, along with the High Mountain Tauren allied race. There are 2 drawbacks to Bull Rush. First, Bull Rush is not stackable with most other speed effects, like for example a Druid's dash ability or a speed potion. While it would be fun to go full Sonic, at least this restriction makes some sense from a gameplay perspective. However, Bull Rush does work with most Druid shape-shifting forms and a Shaman's Ghost Wolf passive speed increase. The only Druid form Bull Rush does not work with is Travel form, which already is as fast as a mount. The second drawback to Bull Rush is that there is no way to stop it or change direction once it's in motion, and does not stop at world edges. This means it can be very easy to Bull Rush over a cliff edge or die to fall damage if the player is not careful enough. And finally, at number 1, we have another Worgen racial ability named Dark Flight. This
That's
ability
the one.
allows a Worgen player to increase their movement speed by 40% for 10 seconds.
It's actually strong.
Added in Cataclysm, this ability started out with a 3-minute cooldown, but was changed to 2 minutes shortly after it was introduced. Upon using this ability, Worgen players...
I saw like a guy, and he was like fighting in BGs. There was like a clip of him in YouTube, and this guy used to actually to play super offensive, and he killed the other player, and it was like a 1v1 situation. And this player always tried to hide behind something, some sort of pillar. He went under this one kind of bridge thingy, and this Worgen Fury Warrior, he was constantly up on this guy's face, and he couldn't even recover in the fight, and he lost. So I think, I'm not sure, in PvE, I don't really see a use, because if you're doing, let's say, Mythic Plus or raiding, you have to wait for all of your group mates to arrive anyway at the boss. So I think in PvE, speed bonuses are very useless. But when it comes to like farming stuff, like nodes and like your professions, or PvP, I actually really love this kind of speed ratios.
Allows a Worgen player to increase their movement speed by 40% for 10 seconds. Added in Cataclysm, this ability started out with a 3-minute cooldown, but was changed to 2 minutes shortly after it was introduced. Upon using this ability, Worgen players gain a speed boost, one that won't even break a player's stealth or a druid's form. This means it has a huge benefit to Worgen rogues and druids with their passive speed boosts. Darkflight has a separate cooldown from other speed abilities, meaning it can be used right after or before a rogue sprint or a druid's dash to keep them moving. Unfortunately, Darkflight does not stack with either dash or sprint for extra zoomy action, but it does make Worgen the fastest of the fast druids and rogues you can find. Darkflight can be quite situationally useful, and its main appeal lies in being able to sustain long bursts of speed. Darkflight does stack with several other speed abilities, such as a druid's travel form or speed potions. Darkflight is also useful when running away from players in PvP, or even giving chase to them, or it can be useful for escaping after pulling too many mobs, or to quickly run across a boss room to escape mechanics. Because Darkflight is so versatile and can be used in combination with class abilities to extreme effect, it deserves to be our #1 spot for the best racial mobility ability. Alright, and that's the video. Are there any other racial mobility abilities that we may have missed, or have ideas for future videos similar to this one? If so, let us know down in the comments.
I think none was missed, right? That's interesting, but yeah, I would, if I had to put one on #1, okay, I will make my personal ranking, okay? So #1, Rocket Jump of Goblin. #2, Worgen Darkflight, because it lets you play way more aggressive on certain classes, be it Fury Warrior, Rogue, or Druid. If you're like Feral, for example, you can like permanently get like a speed buff, right? #3, I would place the Void Elf one. #4, Mecha. Then maybe... yeah, #5, Zendalari Troll. #6, Dark Iron Dwarf. And then anything else unchanged. Yeah, that would be my ranking for this. When it comes to usefulness and in the situations you actually encounter in game. But wow, interesting. Yeah, this is what I'm saying, like, sometimes people, when they pick a race they want to play, they go on freaking DPS in pages like Blood Mullet. And if they see, like, one race is two ranks higher than, let's say, a Goblin, for example, or Worgen, they are going to pick this race instead. But you have to look at everything, not just raw numbers. Sometimes you want to have something that makes you either tankier or that has a purge, for example, in it. Like Dark Iron Dwarf, you can purge some effects of you and you get like a DPS increase for a short amount of time, right? So it's really good if you like want to be more survivable, because you have now some sort of cleanse for you, right? So I think this is really, really OP. Same with Goblin, you get a nice mobility skill. If you want to be more of an aggressive player, you can go for Worgen. And even though in DPS sims you are like a little bit lower than some other races, you are in some scenarios, in some situations of the game, actually better than those races. But also depending on what kind of content you are doing, right? But yeah, this is very fascinating. This was a very informative video. Definitely a thumbs up from me. And I've learned a couple of new things from this as well. So yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. I wish everyone a wonderful day. I will see you guys next time.